Welcome in. Let the tingle begin. Welcome in. Welcome in. It's an old song, if I remember right. I think it was Rub It In. It was really old. I think early 70s. It's amazing how our memory holds our energetic memory and who we are with our DNA and our ancestors. And welcome in. I know I came in running. Hold space for us. Actually puts our imprint there. Of our DNA and ourself, right? Here in spaces that we're at now, even here, right? Trying to see what that is behind me. Notice that? What is that when I did that? From here, I didn't, when I moved up, it didn't do it right. Between the W and the S, it was there. Right there, it's not there now. Okay, about this side. See, that's funny because when you see that right there, I've seen it. Two faces. They might be behind. Oh, wow. I know where they're coming from. Left. Yeah, it would be on the side. From what's behind me, as you see, this is actually not my literal background. It's a virtual background. My symbol, my signal, my emblem that I had made, 3 years ago, I believe. This emblem was made, but anyways, welcome. I hope nuances helped you with your discernment and that you're able to soar with your discernment with it connected to the nuances that you can see now through your discernment. They go like peanut butter and jelly, like I said. So maybe I should say like health in alkalized water. Better than peanut butter and jelly, right? That's funny. But anyways, glad you guys are here. Glad you guys are available. Glad you guys keep coming back. Those coming back, thanks for the new viewers. I've seen some of the subscriptions go up some. So I know I got some new folks that are definitely here. Running with the pack. Definitely appreciate that. So we talked about the nuances and we talked about embracing your darkness, your wholeness, your whole space of embracing you, which is also your yin and your yang, that's your light and your dark, your dark side or your shadow self, your subconscious mind, which Carl Jung spoke so much about, embracing it. And I shared my experience, how it worked with me. So I guess if we embrace our dark spots, we would have to also embrace our triggers. What triggers us, we must embrace. And you say, what, D-boy? Catch the nuance. It's in the nuances. Why you would understand that, why you would embrace your triggers, is in the nuance of why you would embrace your triggers. It's connected to the nuance and the discernment. So since we want to embrace the triggers, I got a friend I want to share today. Her name is Gabi Kovalenko, and we're going to talk about embracing and how to embrace one's triggers. So we're going to get right to it. Miss Gabi Kovalenko. Let me put this on so I know what I'm doing, or I might not see things. All right, so this is called Key to Conscious Living, but it's embracing triggers, overcoming triggers, but it's also called embracing them, reactivity and separation, because we know a lot of our triggers give us reactions. So let's go. It's roughly 18 minutes, not very long, 19 minutes. So let's go in and let's get it.
Voice guides you to do. It's what your energy has the potentiality to become. And it's where your observation can take you when you live in the world of objective, integrated truths. However, you are not.
I will stop and implement what I say, like I always do here. Notice she used the word integrated. Heavily integration of taking two opposites and integrating them as one is part of the lesson that you do in your consciousness. It's part of your consciousness uprising of your when you transcend these things together, right? When you put them together and you integrate them, they help you to transcend, which means go over and not go around and actually seem like you went through them when you didn't experience them at all. The best teachers experience, not memory. But let's go.
Not your awareness. If you're just observing it as an aspect of your field, maybe it's mental awareness, maybe it's physical awareness that isn't fully grounded into your emotional experience. Maybe it's awareness that you externalize, but you don't necessarily apply to yourself. So the key is not holding on to this awareness as a distant expression of you or a suggestion of what you might become if you become a match to that awareness. The goal is to actually become it. It's to see no difference or distinction between yourself and the awareness within your field, which means you correspond to the nature of your awareness at the level of the mind, body, heart, and spirit. It means you emotionally are a match to all of your deeper values, beliefs, and you see no need to separate the conscious and the subconscious mind, which is the most important precept to conscious living. Consciousness is the art of integrating your awareness in order to become more aware of every single aspect of your experience, inside and out.
Key word she said, consciousness, art. The art of consciousness is integrating your awareness. There's that integration again that I spoke so highly of. A mainstay in your ascension, is integration. True consciousness, the art. That's like, remember I said that actually alchemy is the art of salvation. It's the art of many things, because alchemy is everything it is. And we will break a video down showing the different aspects of it. But the art of salvation is bringing Christ consciousness from the higher realms to deep dive to wake you up out of sleep. Integration's everything. The art of consciousness is integration. I love this.
The more conscious you become, the more aware you become of why things are the way that you are and why you feel in the way that you do. Consciousness is not only about the subjective experience happening inside of you, it's also about seeing every distinct aspect of reality as being on part of a continuum. And you experience that continuum as a reflection of your own inner world when you start to pinpoint that every single experience that is collapsing in your field is in some way making you aware of certain aspects equally within your inner and your outer experience. The state of analyzing your consciousness is a state of becoming aware that what you're experiencing internally is in some way reflected outside of you. And likewise, understanding that if you're holding certain incongruencies or splits between your inner and outer world, that is going to be emphasized as conflict in some shape or form.
There's the conflict, right? When there's a split, she called it congruencies. The split, now you have the two opposites working against each other in a conflict or a war, right? No wonder there's so much war, because our reality is based on division. We have a bunch of war gods being celebrated as gods, from Mars to the Yah and the Way, and to even all the aspects of the stuff we start the demiurge, which is all about war and conflict.
If you're choosing to maintain any kind of a split within whether that's a split between how you physically feel and how you express those feelings, or how you connect to your body and intelligence versus the way that you present on the external front of reality, you're going to be experiencing a mismatch or a conflict of interest, either between you and yourself, you and your soul, or you and anyone or anything else in your outer experience. The more that you try to regress from the state of actually assuming responsibility for the conscious experience and every single aspect of your reality, the more you're going to be pained by the different splits and opposition that you experience outside of you. Hence, whenever people disagree with you, you end up being manipulated, or you experience certain outcomes that are not exactly what you would hope to experience, the more you end up polarizing both internally and externally. And what that could feel like is you end up creating an even more oppositional response against yourself or against any aspect of your reality, which appears.
Have you experienced this? Because I'm going to be honest, I have. And this is something that my awareness is really triggered into, using the word trigger. This is where my awareness is at, noticing these kind of reactions that bring separations.
To be against you. The more that you hold this negative resistance against anything happening internally or externally, the more you end up experiencing a split in this aspect of your conscious awareness. You end up feeling fragmented from the state of being the experiencer of reality, in addition to actually being the experience. When you feel anything that you feel is unwarranted or is unjust, then what you're doing is you're excluding yourself from the equation of conscious experience. You're choosing not only to deny the idea that everything happening in reality is happening intentionally and due to the collapsing of certain possibilities in the conscious experience at large, but you're also choosing to revoke your responsibility as a part of that conscious experience, which means you're depriving yourself of free will if you don't believe that you're actively playing a role in how your life unfolds, and you're likewise keeping yourself from creating changes to optimize this experience for you. Anytime you feel intensely triggered by what's happening in the outer plane of experience, you're creating a deeper fragment because you're choosing not to recognize that the thing that's triggering you is in some way revealing an internal aspect that must be healed. And so one of the easiest and most difficult ways to integrate these different splits or fragments in your psyche and in your reality is by analyzing the triggers. What makes you frustrated? What makes you intensely sad or feel any kind of polarizing emotions which you feel are outside of your control? Whenever you're dealing with a trigger, the nature of that trigger is to blow up a certain aspect of your internal organism in order for you to evaluate the way that it's making you feel. And any unresolved feelings will keep repeating themselves through different kinds of outer experiences to help you recognize what you're storing away from yourself subconsciously. A trigger is anything that creates a violent reaction because you're not used to seeing that and integrating that particular element in your life. A trigger is also something that tends to happen frequently as part of this feedback loop of your consciousness, because when you recognize that trigger and you experience a more violent reaction against it, you end up locking in the importance of that trigger. What most of us don't realize is that triggers are actually gifts that orient us with exactly what we need to integrate in order to come into a more neutral state of alignment and observation. If we were to view every single trigger as an important stimulus that's actually prompting us to look beyond the nature of the conscious mind's reactivity and to move into the state of trying to reconcile the difference between us and the physical experience we're having, we would start to recognize that triggers are really leading us back into our own souls.
My first encounter with consciousness from another world was when I met someone in 2010 whose most recent past life.
And the thing you are not your awareness if you're just observing it as an aspect of your field. Maybe it's mental awareness. Maybe it's physical awareness that isn't fully grounded into your emotional experience. Maybe it's awareness that you externalize, but you don't necessarily apply to yourself. So the key is not holding on to this awareness as a distant expression of you or a suggestion of what you might become if you become a match to that awareness. The goal is to actually become it. It's to see no difference or distinction between yourself and the awareness within your field, which means you correspond to the, and you experience that continuum as holding certain incongruencies and by the different splits against any aspect of your reality experience. When you feel anything that you feel is unwarranted, which you feel are outside of your control, creates a violent reaction because you're not used to seeing that trigger. What most of us don't realize is that triggers are actually gifts of the difference between us and the physical experience we're having. We would start to recognize that triggers are really leading us back into our own souls. And the thing, the object, place, or the circumstance that is seemingly creating the trigger outside of us is actually revealing the part of us that needs to be healed, that needs to be understood, and that needs to learn to respond more consciously rather than being triggered, which reveals where emotional maturity is warranted most. In other words, in order for us to become the bridge of consciousness that fills the gap between the subconscious and the conscious mind, we need to understand the difference between what we are holding subconsciously and what we're feeling or responding to on the conscious mind's level. The conscious mind is prone to react to reality in a way that is largely unconscious, because the conscious mind tends to create a detached emotional response. What you're used to being triggered by, for example, is something the conscious mind reacts to as a threat. It's something that you think needs to be reacted to with negativity, with polarization. For example, if something seemingly bad happens to you, you feel you need to deny that particular thing, push away from it, react in a violent way in order to prove to yourself or to other people that you don't like the thing that is happening on the external front. Now, if you allow yourself to respond to reality like this screen that is projected from an external place rather than from an internal place of awareness, then what you're going to be feeling is like you're this avatar in an unconscious universe that's experiencing constant threats and constant conflicts that keep you away from yourself. You're going to feel like there's always going to be some threat or controlled opposition outside of you that's keeping you inhibited, that's keeping your consciousness trapped. Because what it's going to feel like is like you always need to live in survival mode and engage yourself in different defensive ways to keep your ego in a reactive mode that seemingly keeps you safe. From this standpoint, you might feel that if you lower your defenses, you're going to be vulnerable, susceptible to risks. You might feel a fear of failure or fear of an unknown that you think will cause you to actually be deprived of your free will or your true identity. Now, this is rooted purely in the illusion that if you lose control of your ego, you're going to lose control of your reality. But ironically, the opposite is true. When you fear losing control at the level of the egoic mind, what you're actually fearing is the integration of those inner aspects that are keeping you polarized, that are keeping you in this constantly anxious state of needing to react to external triggers because you think that past threats are going to repeat themselves. For example, if you've ever been hurt or felt your ego bruised in the past, you're going to want to stay apprehensive because you think that reality is going to be a dangerous environment to exist in if you choose to diminish those coping mechanisms. You might feel that if you stop playing the role of a victim, or you stop keeping your guard up at all times, that you're going to be exposed to the same risks that made you feel an unwanted emotion in the first place. However, what the ego doesn't realize when adopting this particular strategy is that there are different ways to respond consciously to reality other than by just creating more defensive mechanisms. More egoic walls and coping mechanisms don't need to be implemented to learn how to live and be consciously. Likewise, we don't need to keep creating new alter egos or false selves in order to protect ourselves from unwanted responses from other people in order to experience our truth. We also don't need to go into hiding mode and suppress our emotions or seclude our true identity if we've been hurt by other people for being our true self. And yet this is the misconception that the ego wants us to believe. It wants us to think that if we don't comply with all of the fearful tactics that it's trying to impose to keep us safe, we're going to be hurt again. However, there's a deeper way to engage in this game of the polarizing dance of emotions that plays out in our reality. And that way is through learning to consciously respond by choosing to go from a reactive state to being constantly aware of ourselves to the extent that we are choosing the response in real time rather than.
This is heavy and very much definitely is a lot of wisdom for me, and I hear it and I see it, and I've seen those experiences that she's talking about from the fears, from childhood traumas. I've experienced this stuff, and I'm really working on myself now to do it. I appreciate the truth being told to me straightforward that she's saying. If you go back into a really long time ago, a few years ago, 2-3 year ago video, I did a video on specifically what she just said was reaction and response. And I went into how when there's an emergency needed from mental health, from medical, fire, it's not called the reaction team, it's called the response team, because when they get there, they know how to respond in a very professional manner to take care of the situation instead of going into reaction mode, which, a lot of times our ego and like our preservation of our ego and our fears come up, and how to deal with this. Is a very powerful video. Definitely hits home for me too.
Then allowing our subconscious or shadow aspect to play the role of the responder for us. Here's a little how this could play out in any given moment. When you're dealing with any unwanted, triggering situation, or you feel a polarizing emotion come up to the surface, what you are going to be inclined to do is to move into the state of being the energy surrounding.
The pineal gland has tiny little cilia.
Well, one thing I
hair-like
know about
extensions
this,
all around
I
it.
like
When you hold your breath and you finally let your breath out,
the commercials
and you
here
allow
better
that
than a lot of the
cerebrospinal
commercials
fluid
and that. I'm not
accelerate,
a
the
big
acceleration of that
Gaia
cerebrospinal
fan.
fluid.
And some may go, oh, but that's a different story. Come on, please don't please don't just do this. Please don't just do this.
That internal trigger.
Thank you.
You're going to move into some form of a traumatic response, leading you to either contract energetically, move into a state of hiding, try to
Contract,
flee from the
not
external
expand.
trigger, and to run away from the need to even size up the situation and to see the deeper lesson being illuminated. If you feel like the trigger is causing you to freeze or to move into a kind of a response that paralyzes you through sensations that you don't want to be experiencing, the goal is to one-up the ego's reflexive mechanism of shutting you down and keeping you paralyzed by those uncomfortable emotions, and to assume responsibility for the experience you're having. Because as soon as you move yourself into the state of actually embodying your own awareness, all of a sudden, you find a way to gain an upper hand over the ego. Rather than trying to control the ego into doing something that it's not naturally feeling, you're simply becoming the observer. And by becoming awareness, you're able to understand what it is that's actually happening on a multi-layered level of the experience. You're able to see a part of you is instinctively reacting, but you're also able to understand why it is reacting in that particular way. You might start to pinpoint that those emotions you're currently feeling in a certain triggering situation are really reflecting past ways of thinking and being. Maybe it's bringing you into an old circumstance in which you felt triggered by someone or something else. Maybe what's coming up is a certain paralyzing response that you felt when you weren't fully acknowledged. And so instead of holding yourself and creating a safe space internally for you to feel and process the emotions in the now moment, you might choose to circumvent the need to accommodate your authenticity altogether, and choose to circumvent self-love as the ultimate strategy for integration. When you start to accommodate this energy of inner peace by just letting yourself be and observing everything that's happening on the internal plane, you're also able to understand.
I don't know if any of you guys caught that, if this is some of the things you do. She just said something there is definitely a tool to use that I caught in my nuancing, was reverse what the pain is when it happens. So you need space to have thought instead of just go default into reaction, right? You need to have that space of just not going into default settings. If your default setting is somewhat reacting negatively, but the self-talk eternally would be, instead of reacting, just say, I love you, Danny. I love you, whomever you are. Tell yourself you love yourself. Tell your inner child you love it. Whatever that space may be, that's a tool I just heard her say. Go internally and tell your inner self that you love yourself. Instead of reacting, go into self-love instead of reacting negative to the situation that you may always default into. Perfect, I like that.
How what's happening outside of you is allowing you to magnify the deeper unhealed aspects of yourself. Imagine zooming into all of the aspects that are coming up for exploration and simply analyzing them, like a therapist, or like a guardian, or a parental figure that's moving into your field of experience just to understand why it is that you are currently showing up in the way that you are. In this way, you can lovingly hold space for all the different aspects of emotions, physical symptoms, different feelings, beliefs, ideas, and dynamics playing out, where you can even see a bit of yourself in the other people that are currently reflecting in your physical experience. Imagine looking at the entirety of what you're currently dealing with like different pieces on a game board of your life. Every character or individual is playing a certain role in revealing who you are through what you're attracting, through what you're allowing into your reality, through how they are treating you as an extension and expression of how you are treating yourself. Maybe you need to validate yourself instead of seeking validation from certain people. Perhaps you need to let go of certain attachments that are teaching you you are not sustaining a healthy relationship with yourself by maintaining those toxic attachments in your life. Maybe what's triggering you is really teaching you to reevaluate what you're worth and what you're deserving of on a deeper level. Or perhaps what is being illuminated by somebody else or by something that is unfolding in your life is what needs to be integrated by you for your deepest learning and evolution in life. Think about if you were to depolarize and assume that a certain truth is being elicited in this deeply uncomfortable situation you are going through, what that truth would be. It's going to most likely be something that you don't want to hear. And this is why you subconsciously panic and move into a mode of preventing yourself from receiving the bullets to your ego in order to avoid transmuting the energy, which is creating the trigger in the moment. If you were to instead look for an outlet to explore why this energy feels stagnant or feels restricting, you are going to find an opportunity for expansion. And this is where the process of conscious living really becomes a journey of expanding awareness and finding new ways to enable flow by understanding where we're currently limiting that flow state in our lives. Ultimately, if you are not experiencing flow in the present moment, some aspects of you are preventing that flow state. And if you're not experiencing flow through the dynamics in your life, through the situations you engage in, the different circumstances that you're interacting with, then you're depriving yourself of flow, and actually, what's being mirrored externally is the lack of flow you're providing yourself.
Attention retirees, if you're willing to be at your computer from 9 a.m. to 10:45 a.m. on most weekdays, I can show you one simple trade that could potentially bankroll your retirement. Hi, I'm David Kino, and I help ordinary people.
If you assume responsibility for what you're currently going through and seeing that any lack of flow is now pointing to an opportunity you must give yourself to restore the flow and coherence in your field, then you will see how you are the ultimate trigger and how any kind of reactivity is pointing to where you need to respond differently, to choose a higher and more coherent energetic pathway in life. What prevents the deepest and most cathartic of all triggers is the ultimate realization that what you want to blame everybody else for creating, or what you even want to point toward the universe for preventing as an opportunity that you need most, comes down to your reluctance to create change. And the ego might have a multitude of different pacifying strategies to keep you from seeing its obvious blind spots, to keep you from integrating, to prevent you from healing, to circumvent you from the deepest awareness of who you are, because ultimately that is awareness you already hold. You're already aware of where you're lying to yourself. You already know if you're not allowing yourself to choose the highest path of personal mastery. So the question is, why? Why wouldn't you allow yourself to choose to embrace your truth, your authenticity, the individualism of your soul's deepest calling, to understand how you can create all of these changes you are seeking, to stop being reactive to that which you are not, and instead see how all of those triggering situations are pointing to where you need to allow yourself to be the real you. Life can be very triggering because there's always room for self-improvement, and there's always more room for accepting even those different situations and people that aren't able to align with this same frequency of clarity and truth. And yet we must persist. We must build this strength in our spiritual field to maintain the integrity between the ego and the soul, so that we can see there's always room for more coherence to be created, and to see that neutrality is the ultimate response in a polarizing world that always challenges us on our ability to stay true to ourselves and to stay in a specific state of always being adaptable and friendly to the challenges of life, even when they attempt to claim our sovereignty and authority over ourselves.
Very powerful. Very powerful video. Down to the
nitty gritty of self. I definitely can align with that video of enter reflection and introspective of myself, and I see a lot of what she's saying, and I do see that, and definitely know that though I'm going to embrace that part of myself too, instead of being against it, which maybe I have been, because I see it as certain things is not always so good. And maybe it's the triggers, or what I need to know is actually the tools saying, here it is, heal it. Here it is, deal with it. Here it is, no, this is your hurts and pains, and this is for everybody, because this to me goes to everybody. Definitely. So on the screen, D-Boy West Coast Uncensored, right? PayPal, I will add that later, because I'm doing that and I haven't looked at the PayPal, so I will put it on the screen when I edit it. You guys have another great and wonderful day. Appreciate it. Gabby, something else, I really appreciate that video. You guys have a great day.